My name is William L. Grafton. Everybody calls me Bill. I'm 93 years old now, and I don't know how I got to be 93. I think I'm 30. But I was in the Air, I joined the Air Force back in 1942, and I had 5 brothers. We all were in the service at the same time. My mother was a widow, and I was missing for 3 months before they knew I was alive. But we trained, of course, we trained on B-24s, and they formed a group of 48 crews, and they sent us to Topeka, Kansas to pick up airplanes, and they had no airplane. And so they decided to send us overseas and then fly the airplanes to us later. And so they sent us to Newport News, Virginia, and we caught a ship. We got on a ship, a big one. There were 4,000 ground troops on there, and we were 480 people plus ancillary people. And we went on this ship. I can't remember the name of it, but I think it was a 3-stacker. And we went across the Atlantic Ocean, and around the Christmas of 1943, and we went across the ocean, and then we went into the Mediterranean Sea because they wanted to look with these ground troops to a base there for replenishing the troops that had been lost. And they put them off, and then they came to our commander and said, you know, we've lost all your records. We don't know where we're supposed to take you. So we talked to our people back in the States, and they said, dump you off here. So they dumped us off in Oran in a replacement depot. We were 48 crews, and the smallest, everybody was either a staff sergeant or better. And so they couldn't do anything with us because they never handled anything out of organization like that. So we spent about 3 weeks just exploring the countryside and going at night and getting drunk. And a couple of times I don't even remember what happened because I took too many a drink. But anyway, at the time they had the losses up in Germany at Regensburg and down in Austria at Steyr, Austria. And they lost so many ships because they had a mission plan for the 15th Air Force and the 3rd Air Force, or the 8th Air Force rather, from Britain to meet over the target. And they were going to just wallop that target. Well, they had a terrible fog in Britain, and we didn't have radar at all back in those days. And they couldn't get off for 3 hours. But the 15th Air Force didn't know this, so they just took off and went to the target. And the Germans had figured out, I guess they got the information somehow. They had some good spies, and they just whopped the 15th Air Force really bad. And then 3 hours later, they came from the 8th Air Force came from Britain, and they got just walloped too. And we lost probably about 100 airplanes. And so after that they were looking for crews just to fly their airplanes that they had. And they found us, and they kidnapped us. Because they couldn't take the whole group because we were 24, and so they just broke us up and put us in different squadrons. It's the 2nd Bomb Group, and I told them, I said, I've never seen a B-17. I have no idea what it looked like. And they said, well, that's no problem. It's easier to fly, and so we're going to train you anyway. And we had one training flight, and we were in combat. And the first mission, we were going to bomb the abbey that was above Anzio but they thought the Germans were occupying because they were just beating these people to death down there. And they finally decided after about 3 months that thing should be bombed. And we were on that crew that bombed that thing. But when we made our first takeoff, once we got it airborne, we had to put the ball gunner in the ball, and we had to add oxygen to his bottle because it turned around all the time, and we didn't have the seals or everything to provide oxygen at all times. So we filled his bottle from a flex hose. Well, I let some of the other guys do it, and I told them to hang that thing up on a hook that they had, but they didn't do it right. And we flew on a few more minutes, and the vibration, this thing fell right into the gear mechanism, and it cut the hose off. We lost all of our oxygen on the airplane. So we turned around, went back to the base, and we assumed, boy, we won't have to fly this. They had an airplane waiting for us. We had to hop out of this plane and get on the new one and go back and try to catch a formation. We finally caught the formation over Mount Vesuvius, and Mount Vesuvius was erupting. So we were off far enough away we weren't affected by the cloud. And so we went on and bombed the Abbey, and the results of that was not satisfactory at all because the Germans then moved into the rubble. And so it took quite a while, but they finally got some Australian mountain climbers that were troops, and they sent them up to wipe the Germans out, and they did. But I think the people were there on the beach for about 3 months, and they were just being murdered every day. But the general that was running the show when they made that landing, if he had gotten off the beach, he'd have been behind the lines, and any reinforcements or anything would have been easy to bring in. But he waited. He wanted to wait for reinforcement. And that's a mistake. And that's a good thing we had somebody like George Patton, because he didn't wait around for anybody. But anyway, we were on our 18th mission that counted. We could only count our missions if we could see the ground, and we didn't have radar. We couldn't bomb because we were over the Baltic states down there. And so I've forgotten how many missions we actually flew, but only 18 counted. And we were on our 18th mission when we got shot down. And we got shot down by fighters. Our intelligence had told us, don't worry about fighters anymore, we've shot them all down. They forgot to tell the Germans. But anyway, fighters came in and got 2 or 3 rows of planes behind us, and he got to us, and I was a flight engineer. I was 19 years old. I was flying the top turret in combat, and I could see everything. And the fighter came in, and I could see the front of his airplane just light up from a cannon that he was firing. And all of a sudden, the left horizontal stabilizer just disappeared. It just was gone. And then 2 great big holes the size of a bushel basket appeared in the right wing, in the top of the right wing. And it ruptured the fuel tank, and the fuel was coming out and flowing about 200 feet behind the airplane, and it caught fire. And we lost 3 engines, and we had 1 engine still running. And I climbed down out of the turret. The pilot had told everybody else to bail out. And so 7 bailed out. They bailed out within sight of the formation. And when they went back, they told everybody that 7 guys survived, 3 died. They didn't know that we were trying to fly the airplane back. And when we bailed out, it was so far away that they couldn't see us. But they notified all 10 families, there were 10 of us on the crew. They notified the 10 families that 3 of the crew had died, but they didn't know which 3. Now, why in the world they would have done that, it was beyond me. But my mother was a widow, and she didn't know I was alive for 3 months. But anyway, when we got hit. I got down out of the turret. The pilot turned to me and said, "Can you put the fire out?" And I said, "No way." And he said, "Well, how about if we went into a dive, maybe that'll put it out." I said, "Well, it can't hurt anything, except I hope the wing doesn't come off." And he went into a dive, and the three of us tried to pull out, and we couldn't get the thing back level. One of them accidentally turned on the autopilot, and with that, we were able to get it level. And that time I told the pilot and the co-pilot, I said, "We've got to get out of here. This thing is going to blow." And they got up and put their parachute on. We couldn't wear a parachute. We had to wear a harness, and we just attached a chest pack. So I finally convinced them we better get out of the airplane after a couple of minutes. And I went out to Bombay, and I just dived in, and when it did, I was plastered up against the top of the Bombay. And I had to reach and get the longerons on the side to pull myself out, and then I was down in the slipstream. And I waited for a few seconds to pull the ripcord because we bailed out about 18,000 feet. And so when I put my chute, I could see the pilot about 200 feet away. But the altitude was so great, I couldn't communicate with him. And he was looking to see if the co-pilot got out. Well, we never saw the co-pilot shoot, but we landed. He landed in a tree, and I landed in a little clearing and missed a thorn tree about 2 feet. If I had landed in a thorn tree, I'd still been picking thorns up. But I got my chute, and I bundled it up so I could bury it, but we couldn't get his chute down, so I finally just threw it down and got him down out of the tree, and we started running. We got into the forest. And about 5 minutes later, here come a little plane, little thing like a Storch. It was about like a Cessna 150 or something like that. And we were able to hide, and we started walking. And the only maps that we had was these little silk maps that they provided airmen. And we had a little compass. We had no food. And we had a bag that we could put water in and put halazone tablets in. So we started running until we ran out of wood. And then we waited until it got dark, and then we tried walking in the dark, but we kept running into everything. And the dogs were barking at all these little villages, and we were trying to keep them getting close to the one. But we walked for 3 days without food, and we were getting really hungry. And we got down to Lake Balaton, which is a big lake in Hungary, in the middle of Hungary. We were aiming to go around the end of the thing and then walk on to Yugoslavia, because we knew we could get help from the partisans and the Chetniks. They weren't interested in helping us, but they could get money for us. But we didn't make it. And we were captured by, we were so careless, we we came out of the woods and we ran right into a guy lying on a little hill, a grassy slope, you might say. And he surprised the heck out of him, and it surprised the heck out of us. He couldn't speak English, we couldn't speak Hungarian, but we were able to convince him that we were hungry. And so he got up in motion, and we followed him around to the other side of this little knoll, and there was a door there. It was a wine cellar, and he was the vento. And of course, the first thing he wanted to do was to give us wine. And if we'd have drunk any wine, we'd have fallen out right there probably. But we stayed there for a couple of minutes, and he gave us the lunch that he brought for himself. And it was good bread. I liked the bread. But goat meat I didn't like very good. And we ate that real quick, and then we drank a glass of wine. And about that time, another guy came in, and immediately this guy's attitude changed. And we knew that we better get out of there. So we got out, we went about another hour down to Lake Balaton. And so once we realized that we were right in the middle of the lake, we knew we couldn't get to Yugoslavia. So we got some water and put in a little rubber bag that we had, and we put halazone tablets so we could drink the water. And we found a haystack, and we got in the haystack, and that's the worst place that you can get because they're always looking for you. But if somebody saw us go into the haystack, and it was getting dark and it was cold, there was still snow on the ground in places. We had a heck of a time at night because the pilot didn't have on a heavy suit. He had on a summer flying suit with just an A2 jacket and regular shoes. I had on the GI shoes because I was standing on a peg for 8 hours in that turret. And I had a heated suit, but without power, it was the best pair of underwear you ever wore. I mean, it was about that thick. And but anyway, the guy made us hold our hands up. I looked out where the hole we'd come in, and I looked right at the end of this rifle, and it looked at I get out a barrel like that. But we got out. There was a young guy. He was probably 18 or maybe 19. He was shaking. He was so afraid, and we were afraid he was going to shoot us because he kept opening the breech of the gun to show us that it was loaded. And so he made us hold our hands up, and we held our hands up until we just couldn't hold them up anymore. And he put a bayonet on his rifle, and he'd keep sticking us with a bayonet to make us put our hands up. But he saw about a quarter of a mile away was a guy herding sheep. And so he yelled real loud, and the guy came over bringing a leather whip about 20 feet long. And we thought, sure, the dickens, we were going to use that whip on him. But he wanted to tie our hands together and tie us together. And he sent this guy into the village to let people know we were coming. And then he took us into the village. And when we got there, everybody in the village was standing out waiting for us. And they thought we were Russians, and we didn't know it. And they weren't very friendly. They threw things at us and spit on us and yelled at us and everything. And he took us on past into the mayor's office. And in the mayor's office, there were about 3 or 4 people in there, and none of them could speak English. And they thought we were Russians still. And finally, somebody brought in a tourist guidebook and had all the languages. And we thumbed through it, and we were able to tell them we were American. And you would have thought it was like daylight to dark, because they loved Americans, but they hated the Russians. And so we told them we were hungry, so they finally decided to make some food for us. And while we were waiting for the food, they had to toast us. And we ate, and then they had to call. The whole village came in. We set up a reception line, and we had to let these guys come in and apologize to them. And then they said, we're going to put you in a prison camp. And they put us on a flatbed truck with about 6 of GIs, Hungarian GIs. And the guy in charge made 2 of the guys take their coats off and give them to us because we didn't have coats. And they drove us for about 60 miles, I guess, to a little town called Sprinburg. And they took us into the square, and there was a big building there. It turned out to be a bishop's castle. And they took us into the castle and took us to the bishop's office, and then there was a bishop and a lieutenant, a Hungarian lieutenant, and they both spoke perfect English. They had been going to school over in the state, and they went home before the Germans occupied the territory. And when they got ready to leave, the Germans had occupied, they couldn't get out, so they had to stay. And they kept us there in a barracks with a bunch of troops behind the place, and we were there probably about a week. And then we got interviewed each day, and we weren't telling them anything. So the second interview, he said, well, we know everything. The Germans have records, and they have the best spies. We know what airplane you were on. We knew where you came from. We knew the names of everybody on your crew. And they said, one of your crew members died. His name was Finn. And of course, we wanted to find out more about him. So since they knew everything anyway, it wasn't any reason for not telling them what they wanted to know. And so they kept us there, and we'd talk to these guys every week. I think they just wanted to talk to us. And while we were there, a captain that was with Rommel came by, and he was in a Volkswagen convertible that had camouflage paint. It was the ugliest vehicle I'd ever seen in my life. Had I known that it was going to be such a favorite, I would have made a deal with that German. He wanted us to join them and fight the Russians. And so we had to tell them that we couldn't do that. But then they said, well, we're going to take you up to another camp. They took us up to Budapest and put us in a castle up there for 2 days. And then they said, we're going to put you in prison. And they did. They kept saying, sing, sing, sing. And we thought they meant for us to sing, so we'd all try to sing. And they said, no, no, no. And they put us in these trucks, where the trucks had the canvas over them, so nobody could see us, because they were afraid that we'd bombed Budapest, and so they were afraid that they might attack us or something. And they took us into this prison. They took us through the gate, and when they opened the fence, we were inside the federal penitentiary for Budapest, for Hungary. And so they took everything away from us and signed us in, and they asked the question, what was your serial number? Well, my pilot had said, tell them that you are second lieutenant, because if you don't, they may separate us. So I said, I'm a second lieutenant, but I put my right serial number now. Well, the Hungarians didn't know the difference, but the Germans, when they came down and interviewed us, they knew that we weren't telling the truth. And so, how much time have I got?
No, you can, good. Yeah, you're all right.
I don't want to talk too much. But anyway, we were there about a month, and I was in a cell with a Hungarian, a white Hungarian, and he told me that he was the pilot of a Wimpy twin-engine bomber, and the distinctive thing about that bomber, they never could balance the engine. And so when you'd hear one, it'd go like that all the time. And why they could never balance the engine, I never knew. On a B-27, on a B-17, you had to balance the engine, or you couldn't stand it after a few hours. But anyway, he said he was a Wimpy pilot. And so I believed all that. But he was from South Africa, and his father was the manager of the Transvaal gold mine. And it went down 10,000 feet. And he told me all about that and everything. And he was wanting to demonstrate to me how they used the drill. And we had, in that room, the room was about a little bit wider than I reached. And it had one little cot, and the cot was made out of steel rod and had a pad on top. And then I had to sleep where we drew straws. I had to sleep on the floor, and the other guy slept on the bed. But my bed was better than his. It had a pad. And but anyway, he was trying to tell me all about how they drilled the rock and everything and put dynamite in. And he had stepped up on the top of the bed to look out the window. Of course, the Hungarians didn't like that. And so they'd come in and put the guns up against our head, and we knew they didn't want us to do it when they did that. But he had stepped up on the bed, and when he did, one of these rods came out loose. It fell down. It broke the end off like that, and it was real rusty, rough. He bit the thing like a crank, went over to the wall, right through the wall. The wall was double brick, about 18 inches thick, or maybe a little bit less. And he drilled into the next cell. My pallet was in the next cell. It surprised the hell out of him to see the hole up here in the wall. But luckily he drilled the hole right about this far over the floor. So that pad that I was sleeping on, I could lay it up against the wall and they couldn't see the hole. But it had made a lot of dust when he drilled that hole. So we rubbed it into it was a wooden floor, so we rubbed it all into the floor so the guards couldn't tell. And we kept that hidden. He did that within the first week. We kept that hole hidden for the rest of the time we were there, about 3 more weeks. But we would sing, and they didn't want us to sing. And they had a solid steel door and a single light bulb, and we had a pot that we used for a latrine. And they had one little desk and one chair. And when they would bring food to us, and they'd feed us a bowl of soup in the morning and a biscuit. Well, we thought, boy, that may not be too bad. At lunch, nothing. At supper time, we got another bowl of this little soup that the chicken just walked in it. It was so thin. And they didn't give us another biscuit, so that became the fare for the whole time we were there. So we got hungry as could be. When I'd go to sleep, I'd be at home eating. And it was my mother. I was trying to contact her, but one of my neighbors apparently sensed that I was trying to, because and my mother didn't know that I was alive for 3 months. So, but this woman said every night I would visit her and tell her I was okay and to tell my mother, and she did. But anyway, we were there for about a month, and a German captain, or Hauptmann, came down, and a Luftwaffe guy, and he interviewed us. And as soon as I knew he could speak English and he was a Luftwaffe, I knew he knew that I didn't give him the right rank. So I changed it and told him I was a sergeant, a tech sergeant. So he didn't say a word. But he talked to all the rest of the guys, and one guy was the same as me, and he told him that he was a lieutenant, but he didn't change his word. And that next day, they decided to take everybody out and let them have showers and get their goods back. When they came to our cell, they wouldn't let me out. Of course, they couldn't tell me why. But when they left, I got to hear everybody leaving the prison. I thought somehow they got me all mixed up with somebody else. They think I'm a spy or something. And they will go out warrior for 3 hours before find out here coming back. And they had taken them out, given them a shower, and then given them all their belongings back. I never got mine back. And I didn't know what happened. And they put us, the next day they put us on a train, and he put about 50 of us in a boxcar. And I met another sergeant who had not told him the truth, and they put him in a solitary confinement that night. And he got to screaming, and we were in this prison, and it was just like a big echo chamber. And it scared the hell out of all of us, because we thought somebody was being tortured. And he did that 2 nights. I mean, he would just get to screaming, and we thought, oh, God almighty, what's going on? But when they put us on the train, I got to talking to the guy, and I told him that my experience, that I had told the guy that I was a lieutenant, but then I changed my mind. He said, well, I told him that also, and I didn't change my story. And we connected why I didn't get put in solitary and why he did. And
where did you end up?
We ended up going through Czechoslovakia and going up to Saga in Germany, where Stalag Luft 3 was. And we went into the camp, and there was about 60 of us enlisted men at that time. And the Germans didn't want to take us through Berlin and up to Stettin, and we didn't want to go through Berlin either, because they were bombing the doggone thing to pieces. And so he said, if you want to get off, if you'll volunteer, we'll let you off. But we can't order you off, because the Geneva Conference won't let us do it. And so we got off, and we were there about 9 months. And there were 10,000 in this camp, air officer, plus us few enlisted men. And they had 4 compounds, 2,500 people in the compound. I was put in a new compound. I was completely separated from everybody that I knew. And I didn't see them until we were put in that camp down at Mooseburg, where there were 125,000 of them. And but anyway, in February, Hitler was almost assassinated in January, and that made everything get a little bit tougher. Oh, by the way, when I first got there, they were just bringing the ashes back of these 50 guys that were shot that had escaped. And they escaped. They had planned to take 300 out, and they dug the tunnels. They dug 4 tunnels, but they only used one, and the Germans had cut the woods back about 50 feet from where they thought they ought to be. And when they went out, the guys had to come up and then scoot along the ground to get into the wood. And one of the guards had to relieve himself, so he went out and he walked. He almost stepped on the guy coming out of the hole, and he set off the alarm. And then they found it, and they stopped everybody else. So the remainder didn't get out. And one of the guys that didn't go, he wrote a book, and the book was used to write the story about the Great Escape. So that story is exactly the way, that movie is exactly the way it happened. And so I knew all about it because I knew the guys that didn't go out. And the story there, even the celebration on the 4th of July, that's actually what happened.
So how did you get out of that camp?
Well, in February of '45, the Russians came toward us, and they got within 30 miles and they were on the other side of the Oder River. If we could hear the guns, and we thought, sure, they're going to come over and liberate. And Hitler thought so too. But they decided to regroup and go into Berlin, take all of Berlin, because they didn't want to live up to that agreement to divide it into 4 pieces. And they didn't want Patton to catch on and go and take Berlin. So they didn't come across. Hitler thought they were. So he ordered all 10,000 of us shot. But luckily, there was a German general in charge of that area. He was an old Prussian general, and he said, I'm not going to shoot POWs. I don't like Hitler anyway. We had a general that had been the air attaché to Berlin. His name was, I can't remember his name, but he must have bailed out just to help us. We never found out the truth, but he was a general, and he was with us. And this guy came and told the general, our general, that he wasn't going to kill us, but he had to get us away from the front. He said, I'll give you 12 hours to get ready. Wear every stitch of clothing you've got. We'll take every bit of food you've got, because we'll never get any more food. And the temperature is 40 below, and there's a foot of snow out there. And so everybody packed everything up. By the way, I was the only guy that knew how to cook. And so I became the cook for this combine of about 12 guys. And we had one stove in this building, and it had a top like this. It had a oven like this. And everybody had to cook on that thing. And so we drew straws to see we were going to get about 30 minutes on the stove each day. And because they wanted to save coal and everything. And so I would fix the meal, or the first meal I fixed. We didn't have anything to cook in. And the only food we had was just the food what the Germans had given us. And so since I was cook, it looked like an enameled red pan, like a wash pan. So I cooked everything in that pan. I put everything I had in that pan. And when I started cooking, the pain started melted and coming off the tin. And when we got the soup done, it was red. But we ate it anyway. And for weeks I didn't have anything to cook in and nothing to cook. So everything I got, I put in one and made a pot of stew. And then our stomach shrank, and I was able to start. It takes quite a while for your stomach to shrink. And then I started making something, and we had talented people that could make anything out of a tin can. And we got a lot of cans, and they would make pots for me, make utensils and stuff like that. And so I'd prepare the meal. I'd have to make it in one pan that would fit inside that oven. And I had 30 minutes to cook it, and then we would eat. And we would eat one meal a day. And I don't know how they survived my cooking, but we finally started getting Red Cross parcels, but we didn't get the ration that we were supposed to. We were supposed to get one Red Cross parcel per person per day. We got one Red Cross parcel for 5 people every day. And so we had to supplement. The Germans gave us food that they didn't want. They gave us horses that had been killed by the bombers, and you'd have to be real careful and don't bite down on any shrapnel. And they gave us vegetables that nobody else would eat. But we ate everything. One thing they gave us that I couldn't eat, I tried it one time. It was called blood sausage, and and they must have scraped it up off the floor to put it in the things to give us, because it had all kinds of stuff in it, and it should have had nothing in it but blood. And I tried it one time, and I never ate anymore. But some of the guys liked it, so they ate it. But we would get all kinds of odd vegetables, like kohlrabi. Have you ever heard of kohlrabi? And they were so tough, you couldn't cook them. You could never cook. It was like cooking wood. But anyway, we survived it. And then, so in February, we started marching. We had to make temporary packs. I had a wool shirt that I had gotten in a package, and I had got a woolen T-shirt with long sleeve, a sweatshirt. I had scissors and a needle and thread. I cut that thing apart and made double mitten. Then I made a hood and put on everything I had. And we started walking at midnight. As we went out the gate, we had everything packed, and it already weighed pretty good bit. For me, I weighed 95 pounds, and the pack weighed about 45. And we went out the door. They walked us past the warehouse, and they gave us a 10-pound box, which was a Red Cross box, and a loaf of bread, which weighed a kilo, unwrapped. And so we just kept walking, and a lot of people threw the food away, but I saved and as soon as we got stopped, I had 2 blankets. I had the 2 blankets in that pack. As soon as we stopped, I took the blankets out of that pack, and I broke up everything out of those boxes and that loaf of bread, and I fixed it so I could put all the food in the pack. And it was so cold, I used the 2 blankets. I made a hood out of it. And it kept me from being pretty cold. And we walked from midnight all night, all the next day, all the next night, until about 10 o'clock in the morning. And it was so cold, you could spit, it would turn to ice before it hit the ground. And we were going through this real deep woods, and there was just a ditch on each side. And the Germans told us, if anybody gets off the road, you're going to be shot. And we were walking along, and we were all kind of nervous because we could hear guns going off. And the Germans thought that the Russians were out looking for us to try to release them. And they got real nervous. And something caused one of the guards to start shooting his squirt gun, and it sounded like a zipper when they shot it, because the rounds came out so fast. And of course, everybody in that line jumped off into the ditch. And when I jumped off in the ditch, it took them about 5 minutes to realize that somebody was shooting, and they didn't want to kill the guards, so they got it stopped. And then they came around rousting us out of the ditch. And I got back up on the road, and I didn't have my blanket. And so I was looking everywhere, and we started walking. I took one step, and I stepped on 2 blankets, but they weren't my blankets. So I reached down and picked them up, and I yelled for everybody I could get to if they had lost any blankets. Nobody claimed them, so I took it and made another hood, and that's probably what kept me from freezing. But we lost a lot of people, and when we got into this little town, they just took over the town. And it was a pottery town, and they put me in the kiln room where the kiln was. It was about 80 degrees in there. And I made it across the room and collapsed and went to sleep and slept for about 18 hours. And I woke up because the German guards were yelling, "We're ready to go." A bunch of us walked out and we said, "You go ahead, we're going to stay here." They said, "We're going to shoot you." And we said, "Go ahead, it would be better than what we did last night." But they decided to let us stay for a couple of days, and then we walked another half a day, and it started raining. And in the meantime, a few of us had stolen wood out of the building and stole nails and everything, and we had a piece of iron, and we made a sled, and we put all our stuff on top of that sled. Well, of course, when it started raining and the snow melted, the sled didn't work. And so one guy, that was an old British guy that had been there for quite a few years, he said, "I've got a solution for you if you want to do it. Everybody has on 2 pairs of pants. Take off 1 pair of pants. Tie up with a shoelace or something the bottom of the leg. Then take your blanket that you have and roll it up and stick it down in the leg. And then put everything else you got in above, and then put a string in the belt loops." That was perfect. You could throw that thing over your shoulder, around your neck, or any way you wanted to carry it, and it didn't hurt. If we'd have known that the first night, it would have been a saving. But then they took us into this army base, and they put us in the gymnasium, with all 2,500 were in one room in this gymnasium, and we slept on the floor. But they made a soup for us that night, and that was the best soup I'd ever tasted. But they kept saying, "We're going to put you on a train in the morning." Well, they put us on the train the next day, but they put 50 of us with all the stuff we were carrying in a 40 and 8 boxcar. And we were in a cattle car, fortunately, really. And we were so packed, we couldn't even squat down. And we were on that train 3 days and nights. And it was really uncomfortable. That was worse than walking, really. And they didn't mark the train at all. If it hadn't been at the time of the Battle of the Bulge, where they couldn't fly, we wouldn't have survived, because fighters were shooting every train that moved in Germany at that time. And they carried us to Nuremberg and put us in a camp outside of Nuremberg, and we stayed there for about 2 months, I guess. And we didn't have any food. And so this general, Vanneman, his name was Vanneman, he was the air attaché to Berlin, so he knew Gorman. And he was able to get word to Gorman, and they took him and a couple of colonels up to Germany, up to Berlin. This general told a sergeant that he had working for him to find him an aide. Well, he came to me and wanted to know if I'd like to be an aide, and I said, "No, thank you." And And I asked him, why did he ask me? He said, you're the only clean-looking guy in here. And so I said, no, but if I'd have gone and been the 8, I'd have probably gone to Berlin with him.
So now you're in Nuremberg.
Now I'm in Nuremberg, and we get bombed every night. I mean, they bombed Nuremberg. They used our camp as the initial point, and we didn't know that. We didn't know that they knew we were there. But Churchill had spies all along, keeping in touch with them, and to keep in, he knew where we were. So the British, we had some British with us, and they said when they get ready to bomb, they'll outline the target with flares, and then they bomb inside the area. Well, they came over the camp and they outlined the camp. And we thought, oh, yes, we've had it. And luckily, they knew we were there, and they bombed outside. But it scared the devil out of them.
So that was your last camp that you were in?
No, we left there and walked down to Moosburg. But that was 2 or 3 months later. And it was springtime. And it was in April, April the 12th, Roosevelt died. And the Germans thought with Roosevelt dying, the war would end. And we told them, no, it won't end. We got a vice president. And that really disturbed them. But they got so lax because they were so disheartened that they weren't even they didn't care what you did. And a couple of other guys and myself, we started hanging back. And the group passed over the Danube, and I think, the Danube. And it was manned with American bombs that had not exploded that they had rescued. And we were about a mile behind, and here came a guard back looking for us. And he said, you guys better get it back into the formation. The Gestapo and the SS are out looking for any straggler, and they'll shoot you on the spot without asking a question. And so we ran like hell, and as we ran through this little village, an air raid started. So P-47 was strafing the marshalling yard. When we got through the little town, and they had moved the POWs into a pasture, and these P-47s would fly over and waggle the wing. They knew we were there. And some guys had carried some white cloth with them, and they wrote POW on them. But these guys knew we were there, and they'd come over and waggle their wings at it. But we kept, at that time, the German guard wanted to turn us loose. And we said, no, sir, because we knew that the Gestapo and the SS would shoot us if they. So we had to bribe them. We told them we were getting food from Switzerland by that time. So we told them we'd feed them if they'd stay with us. So they took us on down, and they put us in this camp at Moosburg, Stalag 7A. And there were 125,000 people in that camp. And there was not room enough in a building, so they put up 300-man tents, circus tent, and put them, they dug holes. The Russians did it. They dug holes to put their tents in. And of course it rained, and we were laying on the floor, on the ground, and we woke up with water. I was laying on about 4 inches of water. I had found some waterproof paper that was made of, that had tar and paper and tar, and it was like a seal. And I made what am I trying to say? I made a sleeping bag out of that. I had needles there, and I sewed it up. And I didn't get wet until that water had come up and leaked in the hole where I'd entered the thing. And then we stood up for 3 days. Because we couldn't it kept raining, and we couldn't get the ground wet, dry, so we didn't sleep. But we had to do our own cooking, even on a trip. And so some of the guys made these little blowers that you could heat water just by just a few sprinklers, and it had a blower like in a forge, And so that's how we cooked. and I did cooking off of some things like that.
How long were you there?
We were there about a week, and Patton came. And he came. I was familiar. I knew the guys that had been talking to the German to make sure they didn't shoot when he came in. And they tried to give their guns to us, but we wouldn't take them. And before Patton came in that morning early, a couple of P-51s came over, and they started doing all kinds of things above us. And one of the guards, we all got out in the company street, and it must have been, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 of us in the street. And one of the guards started shooting over our heads. Boy, we were gone like that. But we got him stopped, and then nobody shot except there was one sniper in a steeple of a church. And when Patton started in, he shot at somebody before Patton. And a tank just turned around and fired one shot. The whole steeple disappeared. But Patton, I knew Patton was coming in. I knew when he was and where he was going to come in. So I was standing by the fence. The tank came up. I had to get out of the way. It ran over the fence. And right behind it was Patton in a Jeep. I grabbed the right rear bumper of his Jeep and just held on to it. And when he came to a stop, I was standing there behind him, and there was one guy that had a clandestine camera, and he was on the top of one of the barracks of one of the blocks, and he took 2 pictures. I'm in one of the pictures. Yeah, and so I'm proud of that. I was behind him, but I was leaning out, and you could see my face.